Hello, everyone. This is Lamo, and this is the 12th episode of the Listen to My Opinion podcast. Don't really have any particular topics today, but I am just going to talk about things that are coming up in MMA. Like, we have a pretty bad UFC card coming up, but I will name off the fights that I am looking forward to seeing, depending on my plans. I don't know if I'll be able to see all of them, but these are the fights I want to see. Looking through the list, Francisco Trinaldo fights on the prelims, and any opportunity to watch Francisco Trinaldo fight before he retires is a treat, so I will be watching that. Tanner Boser really let me down in his last fight, but I mean, who gives a fuck about me, and I'm still going to be, semi-excited to see if he can build upon the skill set he already has. The next fight, Tom Breeze. Tom Breeze is always a joy to watch. Great boxing, and he's becoming more of a well-rounded MMA fighter, and I want him to keep winning. Pons is fighting again, even though Pons probably isn't what he used to be. He's fighting again. That's good. He's a talented fighter. Walt Harris, only because he has the highlight reel KO of Chase Sherman. That's the coolest combination I've ever seen in my life. And then Rozenstruik and Sakai, I do not understand why that's the main event. Man, it does not make any sense to me. I can't justify it, but hopefully it's a good fight. And that's really all I have to say about the card coming up. I don't think it's like the worst card ever, but it's definitely not a good card. But thinking about cards of Christmas past, we can talk about Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt if you're ready for that conversation. I have made the speculation for a while that Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz was simply a stylistic matchup, and that's why it was so successful. Also, the story of that fight has been exaggerated to make it seem like it is a complete shutout. That fight is not a complete shutout, although it is a clear win for Cody. Cruz started to figure him out later in the fight, and even though Cody had a great round 4, which pretty much sealed the deal for him, Cruz was still coming back in the fight, and it wasn't just a one-sided ass beating. I would say it was like a competitive ass beating. And that being a really good stylistic matchup for Cody Garbrandt and him executing that game plan to perfection, it really helped elevate his career to places we probably didn't think he was going to go, and then it made people think that he was a lot better than he actually was for a very long time. Don't get me wrong, he's a supremely talented fighter, but his skill set is not where it needs to be, and I think that's the result of training with Team Alpha Male and Mark Henry. Now, Eddie Alvarez is the exception to the Mark Henry rule. Eddie Alvarez and Prime Frankie Edgar, they are really good, but I do not know if Mark Henry's a good fit for most MMA fighters, and especially not Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt needs to go to someone that's going to really help his pocket game get better, because talented pocket fighters are typically people that are a lot quicker than you and have a lot of stopping power, and that really describes Cody Garbrandt. I mean, he's just quicker than most people he fights, and he also has that stopping power. And I think that Trevor Whitman helping him get better positioning on his pocket exchanges, helping him stay defensively responsible with his footwork, I really think that this would unleash a version of Cody that would be honestly quite terrifying. Like, if you could guarantee me Cody Garbrandt would train for Trevor Whitman for 2 years, really adapt to his system, really discipline himself, then I would bet on him to beat TJ Dillashaw in the first round. Honestly, I think he would just knock him out. And that's how highly I think of Trevor Whitman, obviously, but it's also how highly I think of Cody Garbrandt, even though he did lose to Rob Font, because Rob Font beat him by simply jabbing and cutting the cage. Like, obviously, there's a lot more to it, a lot more nuances to that, but that's really what it was. It was a guy with an educated jab, cage cutting, and setting up his combinations off the jab, and Cody had no answer for it. Cody, a couple of times, had opportunities. Whenever he would jab back, it would land almost always. If you go back and rewatch that fight, take note of how little Cody jabs, and when he does decide to jab finally, it lands pretty clean. So, like, imagine if Cody knew how to set up his jab and build off of his jab and time his jab. He could probably knock people out with a jab. Like, honestly, like Terrence Crawford type stuff. Like, my point is that I think with the right coaching, he could be a really good striker in today's meta. Moving on, there's something random I want to say. I think, genuinely, if Charles Oliveira can beat Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, Justin Gaethje, like 2 of those 3 at any point, then I will seriously start to consider putting him in my top 10 all-time great list, because he has the type of resume that doesn't pop off the paper until he gets elite championship title defenses under his belt. Like, he might not have as many, but having the most subs and finishes in UFC history has to count for something. And it has to show how dynamic of a fighter he was. I mean, the guy's been fighting since he was 18. He's 31 now, or 18 or 19 in the UFC. He's 31 now and only has 3 decisions logged. Like, that's crazy. This guy's one of the best action fighters of all time, and I think that if he gets a couple of elite defenses under his belt, that he would deserve the credit of being an all-time great. Moving on, Figueiredo and Moreno are rematching in a couple of weeks, and that is probably the best news ever. Their first fight was an all-time classic, one of the most contested fights I've seen all year. I've scored it 3-2 Figueiredo, but with the point deduction, I think a draw is fair. So they're running it back as they should. Hopefully, these guys make incredible adjustments and come in there and give us a product that we all want to see. And considering I scored it against Moreno, I think some of the adjustments he needs to make is he needs to focus on jabbing early and avoiding all pocket exchanges within the first couple of rounds. And when I say all pocket exchanges, I mean every single one of them. Don't get caught up in them because he is strongest early. Figgy is better in the pocket, and he's going to set up shots and mitigate your return shots in a way that he can just land devastating punches on you and punches that score really well. And I do not think that fighting him in the pocket early is the way to go. I think jabbing, kicking the body, hitting the body at distance on the back foot, you might lose the rounds if Figueiredo can still find those kind of shots. But I do feel like Figgy found his best success whenever Moreno would oblige him in a firefight, especially early on. So I think early you got to start working for the attritional damage to the legs and body, jabbing, kicking, and then in the 4th and 5th start to unleash the pocket exchanges, because by then you've kind of lulled him to sleep in terms of like reading the fight. And I think that he can find a lot more success doing that, and I really want to see that in the first couple of rounds as well. If you need to stall time, buy time, body lock takedowns are always there. He's going to scrabble really quickly, but at least you can get him down. And that's why I'm so excited about this, because Moreno has the capability, he has the durability and the endurance to play the late game. Like, he can actually do this. He's one of those fighters that won't crumble and can actually go through a grueling fight and execute his game plan late into it. And I think that he has a real chance to do that. As of right now, based on everything we've seen, it's hard not to pick Figgy by decision, but Moreno does have a real chance if he makes those adjustments, in my opinion, and I hope he wins. I hope he gets it done somehow. And the last thing I kind of want to get off my chest, so to speak, is just like a debate I've been having like with multiple people lately. It's about the featherweight greatness conversation and where Conor McGregor ranks in that. I say that Alexander Volkanovski is already a greater featherweight than Conor. I know he didn't win the belt in spectacular fashion the way Conor did. He won the belt in a pretty decisive way, but he didn't, starch someone in 13 seconds. I get that. It's cinematic. It's crazy. It's an iconic moment. It's probably the best win in UFC history in terms of, the moment and the outcome and stuff. But to me, it just makes sense to award Volk as the greatest featherweight because he has way better wins than Conor. The Chad Mendes that Volkanovski fought was a couple years past what he was when he fought Conor, but the way he fought showed that he was still very, very dangerous. And Volkanovski adapted his fighting style to be more aggressive so he could take him out. So I look at Conor, especially since Conor fought Mendes on 2 weeks' notice, I look at their wins about the same. Like, Volkanovski fought a very game Mendes, beat him, finished him. And McGregor fought, a 2-week Mendes. So the couple of years added on to Volkanovski's Mendes, it doesn't really matter to me. It's it's equal to me. Now, Conor beat Aldo in a very much more impressive way than Volkanovski did. Volkanovski beat, a past Prime Aldo. Conor beat Prime Aldo. And then Conor also finished Prime Aldo in, less than 20 seconds, which is amazing. So Conor has the better Aldo win. But then they both had beat Max, but Volk beat a Max that is significantly, and I mean significantly better than the one that Conor beat. It's just not even close. It's not a close conversation. The Max that Volkanovski beat is just so good. And the one that Conor beat was like 20. It's not the same kind of win. And then add in that Volkanovski has an argument for beating him twice. I mean, to me, it's very, very clear. Volk has better wins. He has almost the same amount of quantity, if not more. He's done more at featherweight. He's greater than Conor at featherweight. That seems very obvious to me. Now, it may not be to some people, but I just feel like his wins are just better. Also, while I was recording this, Yair versus Max got announced officially, which is a crazy fight. It's a fight that I didn't expect we'd ever get, but Holloway wants to stay busy, and you have to respect that. I mean, he could just sit around and do nothing and get his title shot easy peasy. I mean, him and Volkanovski are the clear two best in the division, unless Brian Ortega comes out a madman and, shows much better improvements, which he kind of did against Korean Zombie, but we don't know how much it was. And but if he comes out and shakes up the featherweight division, that'd be awesome. But assuming he doesn't, it's just Max and Volk. So Max doesn't have to take this fight, but he's going to, and Yair Rodriguez at the very least is going to make it fun. He's going to try stupid stuff. Now, he's probably going to take a career-altering beating, most likely. It's not going to be close past a certain point, or if it might not ever be close, or something really stupid can happen, and Yair can just land the perfect strike to, flatline Max. But that's about the only chance I give him in this fight, because Max is just so much better. It's about the same thing as the Qatar fight, not stylistically, but just in the sense that Max is just head and shoulders above this guy. He's probably going to hurt him really bad. But props to Max for staying busy. And, at least we get to see as much of prime Max as possible before it's gone. Like, he is staying busy, and it's so good. And honestly, if he keeps beating contenders like this, he might be the greatest featherweight of all time. I know Jose Aldo had so many defenses, but once you get a great champion like Max, I feel like he's got the elite wins that he needs. And then if he just keeps beating contenders, I mean, he's on his way. He's on his way. And, but, hopefully, he gets through Yair, then he can fight Volkanovski again, because that's what I want to see. Well, we're here a lot earlier when it comes to getting to the Discord questions, but here we are, and I am going to start off with who is the more dominant champ of their division, Izzy or Marty? Of their division, middleweight, welterweight, that's hard, you got to think about that. Marty, for sure. I don't know why I had to think about it, really. Izzy had a close fight with Yoel Romero, and I cannot think of a close fight that Usman's had. Well, I guess the Colby fight's close, but Usman finished him, whereas Izzy just squeaked by a decision that people still dispute. Next question is, I'm going to be annoying here and ask you to pick the biggest strength and weakness, singular, of each division's champion. Wow, okay, well, that's the type of thing I would feel more comfortable if I could, think about and write out stuff, but I could just, speed run it real quick. Heavyweight, Francis Ngannou. I gotta say that, his biggest strength is definitely his power. It could make a baseline functional game work. It could make a very average game work, and that's definitely his biggest strength. His biggest weakness, right now, I assume it's just striking defense, because he just has this chin where he never gets rocked or anything, so we don't really think about it, but he's getting smacked really hard if anyone can stay alive long enough. So I suppose I'll lock that in for the heavyweight division. Light heavyweight, Jan's biggest weakness is definitely his endurance. I think that if anyone could be conditioned enough to draw out a 5-round fight, that they have a better chance of beating him. Early on, he is a brick wall who cannot be hurt and has good takedown defense and very powerful. But he does slow down as the fight goes on. I think that's his one weakness. And his strength has to be Polish power, right? I mean, not just in his strikes. I don't mean his knockout ability. Polish strength and power for him to be able to take damage, and his guard is able to absorb so much punishment. I really do think that's his strength. In middleweight, Izzy, I mean, his biggest strength is definitely his striking pedigree and how technical he is. His biggest weakness, I think, is definitely a jab and reactive takedowns. Seems obvious. That's what Jan did to him, but whatever. Welterweight, Kamaru Usman. I mean, I think that Kamaru Usman's biggest strength is definitely his grappling game. I would say a close second is his adaptability and how well he can be coached. And then his weakness would be, I guess his weakness is striking defense, because, I mean, he gets smacked every fight really hard, but he has the chin to take it and keep pressing forward. Lightweight Charles Oliveira, definitely his strength is his well-roundedness, how cohesive his game is. His game is specifically designed to pressure you, and if he gets a knockout, fine, but that pressure is going to draw shots, and then he can work his front headlock game. I love how cohesive his game is. That I think that's his biggest strength. And his biggest weakness is, I think, probably striking defense in open space. He's pretty decent about defending strikes in the clinch, but in open space, man, you can just throw power shots sometimes and just completely hit him really hard. And I don't like seeing that. It seems to be a reoccurring theme here with high-level MMA fighters that striking defense is their weakness. There's not a lot of defensive geniuses in MMA right now. But featherweight, Volkanovski, well, here's one. Volkanovski striking defense is pretty good. His offense is pretty good. See, that's the thing. I don't think Volkanovski has any weaknesses, really. I don't think so. There are things that he's vulnerable to. Like, he's vulnerable to step-in knees and uppercuts, because of his shifting and ducking. But besides that, I mean, what's his real weakness? He's competent in defense. He's competent in striking offense. He's competent. I guess his biggest weakness is a lack of a varied clinch. He can use the clinch to control, but he's not really defending too much from there, and he's not landing any cool offense from there most of the time. I don't know. Like, he seems like one of the fighters that has almost no weaknesses, but that does not mean that he's unbeatable. In terms of his strengths, I think that Volk's strengths definitely his adaptability. There is not another fighter that can adapt like Volkanovski right now. Not even, I don't care. There's just no fighter that can understand where he's at in the fight and know what tactics he needs to employ to bring the fight back in his favor. He just knows what to do. And then bantamweight is Aljamain Sterling, I guess. Honorable mention to Peter Yan, as I think he is the true champion. But Aljo, his biggest strength is definitely his grappling pedigree. One of the best grapplers in MMA, if not the best, now that Habib's retired. And weakness has definitely got to be his endurance. Peter Yan, he also is kind of like Volkanovski in the fact that he doesn't have many weaknesses. I think maybe his biggest weakness is pocket defense, but he's so educated about taking these pocket exchanges that you really can't exploit it. It takes like a good pocket fighter like Jimmy Rivera to exploit it and to catch him hanging out there. Most people can't get him in those situations, and it's hard to think about what a true weakness of his is, because his endurance is phenomenal. I mean, he gets stronger as the fight goes on. He's not even a slow starter either. I don't know. He's kind of like Volkanovski, to where it's really hard to think of weaknesses. But his strength has definitely got to be his endurance. I feel like that's just I think it's equal with his technical ability and his endurance. Like, that's how good he is. It's one of the two. You take your pick. Flyweight Davison Figueiredo. His strength is definitely his physicality and the way that he can impose his will on people. If it's not that, then it's definitely his cage cutting and pressure tactics. In terms of weaknesses, it's definitely got to be his endurance and how he fights down the stretch. He fights good, but I think that he gets weaker as the fight goes on. And then women's featherweight, not a real division, but I guess we can just say Amanda Nunes. Her biggest strength has got to be her physicality. She's also really well-rounded, but I think her being such a physical and aggressive fighter really boosts her to levels that most women's MMA fighters can't reach. Her biggest weakness at this point, it's just got to be a highly technical striker, because Valentina Shevchenko was able to mostly outstrike her, even though it was close, despite being really small. There's just no one around Amanda's weight that can exploit some of her striking defense flaws and stuff like that. So I'm going to say that's her biggest weakness. Women's bantamweight, she's a champion there, so the same answers. And then Women's strawweight, Rose. Rose, her biggest strengths are definitely her stopping power early. Just the way that she's able to find the target, set up traps, and she has real finishing ability from there. And early going is definitely her biggest strengths. Kind of like Conor McGregor in a way. Not like, I'm not saying she is Conor McGregor, but you know how Conor McGregor starts fast. Rose, that's her biggest strength, is starting fast and doing really well early. And then obviously I think her biggest weakness is either endurance down the stretch or striking defense, because as good as she is defensively sometimes, she still gets hit with big strikes as she gets more tired, which, you know, it's a blend of the two. So all right, well, I answered all of that surprisingly, so we'll move to the next question. How do you think GSP would have fared against contenders at 185 during his reign? Namely Whitaker, Romero, Souza, Rockhold, specifically the GSP that beat Bisping. I mean, that's just like obvious, right? I mean, he would have got fucked up by mostly all of them. Like, I could see maybe Rockhold and Souza being fights that he might be competitive in for a little bit. Hell, he might be competitive in the Romero fight for a little bit until he gets destroyed. But, I mean, I don't think he does very well at all. I think he came back because he knew, hey, I can beat Michael Bisping. And that's about the extent of it. The next question is techniques that work well in certain divisions only. That's a good question. I've always had... So, I'm not completely sure how to answer this. But I've had theories of certain techniques that would be more beneficial at certain weights. I think that any form of clinch striking, be it knees, elbows, uppercuts in the clinch, would be more effective at heavyweight and higher divisions like that, because they do hit harder, and with you don't need as much force to knock someone out whenever you can hit harder like that. So whenever they're in the clinch, those short shots like that are more likely to knock someone out. I think that if you got really good, like if there was someone with the clinch ability of Leon Edwards at heavyweight, I think they'd fuck a lot of people up. Outside of that one example, I don't really have anything else right now. I'm sure I could think on it more, especially in regards to wrestling, because I've read a few pieces about how like heavyweight wrestling uses certain techniques that lower weight wrestling doesn't. I'm sure that translates to MMA. Just have to read on it more. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is, what do you think is the worst division in the men's UFC right now, and why? Probably heavyweight. I was thinking about saying light heavyweight, but I actually like the fights that are going on right there, whereas heavyweight's putting on main events like Rozenstruik versus, Sakai next weekend, so not really looking forward to that. Next question is, how do you see Volk versus Max 3 going, and what does Max need to do to win? Okay, well, first off, I think they're going to fight 5 times. So, depending on how this one goes, really, Max needs to win this one, because I want them to fight 5 times because it's so close every time and such a fucking amazing fight every time. And but what Max needs to do to win, basically the same tactic shift that he did with the rematch, where he kicks a lot more and tries to cut the cage and forces Volk to fight on the back foot through kicking him. Now, I think he really, really needs to hone in on timing knees and uppercuts. And that needs to be the main focus. Now, he did a lot of that in the rematch, but he didn't do it nearly enough, in my opinion. I think he needs to just up the ante on that, and it's going to do more damage. He'd probably get him a finish win. Next question is shitty footwork Holland's biggest weakness? I would say Holland's biggest weakness is takedown defense. Next question is, who do you think Zabit should fight next? Max Holloway. Yes, I mean, like, even though Max Holloway is scheduled to fight Yair now, he wasn't when you wrote that, but I would love to see Zabit and Max fight. I think that's a fight that makes sense. Winner gets a title shot. I think that's what it should have been all along, but Zabit doesn't look interested in fighting, so who knows. Next question is, where do you think Demetrius Johnson belongs in the GOAT rankings? I have him number 1, but I think he belongs in the top 3 for sure. Next question is, what is your list of top 5 pound-for-pound MMA GOATs? That's a great question. I actually had a big dilemma about how to rank John Jones and Khabib. because Khabib was more dominant against way better competition, but it was for a short duration of time, whereas Jones was dominant against way worse competition for a longer period of time. So it's hard for me to rank them. So first is Demetrius Johnson. Second is Jose Aldo. Third is GSP. Fourth and fifth is John Jones or Khabib, respectively. However you want to rank them. It's hard. I flip-flop every day. And then the next question says, and why are all 5 answers Gegard Mousasi? Nice follow-up on that. Definitely not Gegard. Gegard was really good at one point. Not even close to like a top 10 or frankly probably even top 20 all-time great pound for pound. Next question is, what other analysts, YouTubers have taught you the most about MMA? Are you just guys you'd recommend watching to learn about the sport and see analysis? Okay, so first answer to that has to be Downward Elbow. Just look him up on YouTube. He's got amazing detailed breakdowns. He's taught me so much about the sport. And he's very good like with the visual work too whenever he makes his videos. Definitely go check him out because he's taught me a lot. Jack Slack would be the second. Everyone knows who Jack Slack is if you're listening to me. I'm sure most people do. He's taught me a lot. The first time I ever saw Jack Slack, like his work, was a Fedor article from way back in the day, and it described Fedor's offense, and it just kind of like, I read it and I was just like, damn, like I actually understand what he means. And like MMA, I could see the techniques that he was using versus just thinking MMA was just some, blind brawl, because that's how stupid I was back then. And then I'd say third, probably some guys at the fight site, although most of the fight site people are douchebags. But besides that, I mean, I would say like Ryan Wagner has taught me a good deal about footwork and stuff like that. Ed Gallo, very good wrestling analyst, has taught me about certain takedowns and just stuff like that. I've gotten a lot of help online, and that's what I want to be to people. I want to be just like one avenue of help, because I'm definitely not the most knowledgeable person in the world. I just try to see things objectively and give my piece and convey things in a way that's easy to digest. So that was a good question, but those are the people that I have learned from online, and you guys should listen to as well. Next question is, do you think a cruiserweight division should be added or that weight classes should be changed? I think that it would be really interesting to have a 195 class. I don't think that there should be a 20-pound jump, and I think that guys that can make 195 should be able to do that. People can get more belts. That's one change that I would make. So in response to that, if 195 is cruiserweight, then yes. Next question is, Prime Evans became a light heavyweight champ while, in my eyes, being heavily undersized in terms of frame. How effective would he be if he competed at middleweight? Wow. Yeah, Rashad Evans in that time period, getting down to middleweight, would have been lights out for Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva would have got the shit beat out of him. And that's just the truth. So I think he would have done quite well. And then the last question of the podcast I'm going to take is, how well do you think a Prime Crow Cop would have done in the current UFC heavyweight division? Okay, important distinction, because if Crow Cop got to fight in the UFC heavyweight division when he was at his peak, he would have won the belt without any issue whatsoever, I feel like. But in the current UFC heavyweight division, I think he just gets knocked out by Ngannou. But I think that Prime, he probably could easily be top 10, maybe top 5. It just depends on how well his game translates. Like, he probably would have the ability to kick the shit out of Derek Lewis, but would he have the ability to avoid getting knocked out by Derek Lewis? I don't know. So I think that he does quite well, honestly, because heavyweight is the worst division in the UFC. So, all right, and that's it, guys. I appreciate you listening. Appreciate all the views, everything. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will be back next week. Peace out, fellas.